Welcome to G5 2024 Girl Talk, the first Girl Talk of 2024. I do have to ask a question right away because I've already met a couple people. This is your first time. If it's your first Girl Talk, let me see. 1, 2, 3. Oh my word, this is incredible. Hey! Oh my goodness, that's so awesome. Well, welcome. We're so excited. Just to kind of give you a little lay of the land. What we do is I will just share a little bit of something that God's put on my heart, download that he usually waits till about 2 o'clock the day before to give it to me. So him and I have this arrangement. And then we just open it up for anyone that wants to share. We try to keep it just to like a minute or two just to share maybe something that hit you with this. One of the things that we found with Girl Talk is it's one thing that I can get up and teach and talk about what God's shown me, but where we've all grown the most is when everybody shares. And because every single person in this beautiful room right here has a different walk and been through different things. And this is all going to hit everybody different. And so we just love to hear. So don't get shy. And if anybody will tell you, like Alicia, she tries to hide from me. But if they don't want to raise their hand and nobody wants to talk, then Mama G gets to pick on people. So just get ready. It's really fun. Because you know why? There's no wrong or right anything. It's just you sharing your heart. And just remember that that's how God uses our lives as women and what we go through. So anyway, we're so excited. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to get started. Lord, I thank you so much for this opportunity. I thank you for every beautiful daughter that's in this room. I pray, God, that you would help us open your hearts to what you would have us learn tonight as we grow together. Thank you for your word as you speak through me, Lord, and I thank you that this is your time to take us to the next place. In your name I pray, and everybody said amen. Okay, so you know me and my titles. I actually have a simple one this time. It's simply called Your Next. Your Next. And with 2024 already here, there's a lot that has happened in 2023, and I believe this. I believe that you can go into 2024 without addressing yesterday, but I don't know why we should go into 2024 without addressing yesterday. Because I think we first need to figure out what are some of the things that happened, what are some of the things that we learned, what are the things that we pray to God never happen in 2024. There's all these things, and I believe that we have to look at it. And no matter how much we say, well, 2023 is already gone, yesterday's gone, but it still can carry a weight. There's still some things that a lot of us have from things that happen in 2024. And so I just want us to get ready. I mean, really get ready and understand that God has so much for us. And he is ready for your next. Now, when I was writing this, it made me think of something. I used to travel when Tim and I first got married, and the kids would travel once I had kids. And when they would go, and you've heard us talk about how they would sing in coliseums all over the world. And like 50 to 60 to 70 to 80,000 people every weekend. And this was the thing. They were crazy about the Goads. Because the Goads got up and sang as a family, and they wanted anything and everything they sold. They wanted everything. And so when they would open the doors at 5 o'clock on Friday, they would run to their seats, put something down, and then run straight to the Goad table. And there was no line. It was just 10 deep all the time. Every time you looked up, it was just people. And so I got to where it got to where, I mean, I'm fast. So I'm like this. I'm like getting into it. And somebody be sitting there, and I go, next. And they go, and they've been standing there for 10 minutes, and they still don't know what they want. And I go, okay, next, who's ready? Next, who's ready? And they'd be going, oh, shoot, she's passing me up. Okay, I got to figure out what I want. I mean, I got them going. I go, next, who's ready? You're ready, I'll take you. And I got to thinking about it. That's what I want to say to us tonight. Next, who's ready? Who's ready? Are you ready for whatever God has for you? And how are we going to get ready? And we should be that intense about what's next, because what next is important. So a couple questions I want you to write down. Number one is, what are you carrying? In other words, what do you need to sit down and release? The next question is, who are you carrying? Who are you still dragging with you? And I do mean dragging. The next question is, what are you listening to? What lie or accusation are you still listening to? And the last is, who are you listening to? Who are you still letting affect you and direct you? And this is the deal. It may be your own voice. You should stop maybe listening to you sometimes. Sometimes I'm the worst person to myself. The things that I say, the choices that I make. So sometimes I've got to stop listening to myself. You know, there's this past year for us, when I look back and reflect on this, we were very heavily involved in some businesses and speaking at businesses and stuff. And there were some things that were said about us, our family, and especially my husband. And, you know, especially when it's someone that you love, when things get said or whatever and get done to them, you really take that on. And when I was doing this, God really showed me. He said, you know, I'm glad you're asking these ladies, you know, what are they carrying and who are they carrying with them still into 2024? But I'm going to ask you to look and understand that you're still carrying some things that were said from these people at this company. And it's not my place to carry it. It's my place to let it go. It's my place to just realize that I can't, you know, I can't keep carrying this. Years back, I did a visual. I really haven't done it in a while. I really want to do it again, but we did a visual up here. And I went and got these little cheap backpacks at the dollar store, and we filled them with massive heavy rocks. And on each one of them, we put anger, offense, unforgiveness, bitterness, unresolved conflict, betrayal, all these things. And I asked ladies to come up, and I started asking them to walk around in a circle around the thing. And so we did this for a while, and they're walking and they're walking and they're walking, and then you can tell they're starting to go, oh my gosh, this is getting crazy heavy. Some of them were sweating. It must have been menopause, but they were sweating, and they're carrying these massive rocks. And I said, okay, I want you to stop. And I ripped off anger and unforgiveness and bitterness, and I replaced it with love and forgiveness and letting go. And then I started taking all the rocks out of the backpacks. And then I said, I want you to run like a crazy woman and just let them run and run. And they were like, whoa, this is awesome. This thing weighs nothing. This is so freeing, because they weren't carrying all that stuff. So I want you to think about, is there anything from 2023 that you want to make sure you don't carry into 2024? Is there somebody? Is there some voice? Is there some whatever it is? Because I want us to be free to see what God wants to do in 2024. I know everybody's so excited. It's a brand new year and last year's gone. And yes, it is. But we got some stuff we need to find out about last year. So I want to ask this. What do I need to do before I go into the next? Number one, examine my weaknesses. Where am I failing and where am I falling? There's a scripture, and I told Laura when I looked it up, I realized I didn't put the reference on it. But the scripture says, let everyone be devoted to fulfill the work God has given them to do with excellence. And their joy will be in doing what's right, even and being themselves, and not in being affirmed by others. Every believer is ultimately responsible for his or her own conscience. Oh, she found it. Thank you. Galatians. Miss Laura, you're the rock. Look at that. I love this one. And if you don't have the TPT, ladies, the Passion Translation, get one. It is the best. It has helped me so much. You will love it. They only do the New Testament and Psalms and Proverbs, but it is such a great version. It helps. But I want to read this. This is Psalms 139, 23 through 24. God, I invite your searching gaze into my heart. Examine me through and through. Find out everything that may be hidden within me. Put me to the test and sift through all my anxious cares. See if there's any path of pain I'm walking on, and lead me back to your glorious, everlasting way, the path that brings me back to you. Is that powerful? That's actually, if it's in the King James, it's search me, O God, and know my heart. But I love how this says, if there's any anxious care in me, what are the things where my weaknesses are showing up? So let me tell you what I've decided. I'm determined that one of my weaknesses will absolutely not take into 2024. And that is how much I'm concerned about what people think about me. I'm flushing it because it has been, being in the ministry and being a pastor, it's one of the hardest places. But I'm telling you, it has become a weakness in me because I get so worried if I feel like I've offended someone. I mean, when you're a pastor, you have somebody, we get people all the time like, this is the best church I've ever been to. I'm here till I die. I'll probably be buried at the ranch. You people are the best. And I'm always going, mm-hmm. And then about 2 months later, everybody goes, where's that so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, great question. And then what we do as pastors, we take it on. What did we do? Oh, I think it was the way I looked at her one time. I probably wasn't smiling enough. I didn't hug her enough. And you start going, and you know what? That becomes a weakness because I can't walk in God's full fulfillment and love because I'm so worried. I'm so worried. So I'm just laying out my dirty laundry. That's one of the weaknesses that I'm not going to carry. And I really want you to do some homework. And maybe some of you don't have any. And you know what? That's good. You should be up here teaching because I think that's awesome. I think we all got some. But I want you to really do some homework to start searching, what are some areas that I know I'm weak in? And God, I'm going to ask you to search me and say, I'd kind of like for you to lay this down and let me work with you, whatever that is, because I just know he is showing me areas that I've got to let go on. Number 2, find lessons in the storms and the failures. I know this. 2023 was full of lessons. Every moment is packed with a lesson. I love this quote. You know, it's interesting when we're in a storm, most of the time when we're in the storm, this is what we think. Oh, what I've done something wrong. God, you're upset with me. Or it could be the devil, and he's real. But there's sometimes when a storm is called a storm because God's trying to do something. And I love this quote. We want Christ to hurry and calm the storm. He wants us to find him in the midst of it first. We want Christ to hurry and calm the storm. He wants us to find him in the midst of it first. That hit me. Because I'm constantly saying, how can I get out of this? And I think sometimes God's saying, would you quit wearing yourself out trying to get out of the storm and find me in it because I'm doing something. Just a show of hands, how many of you had a storm of some kind this year? Yes, absolutely. Oh, you guys, bless you. Honey and Miss Nancy. I love how you looked at each other. I think that's awesome. Hey, there's years when you don't. Exactly. And I know you've had them before, both of you. This is from Corrie ten Boom. In order to realize the worth of the anchor, we need to feel the stress of the storm. In order to realize the worth of the anchor, we need to feel the stress of the storm. It is interesting how I think sometimes we would never know what it was like to put faith and trust in God if something didn't happen. We would never have to. But we get so bogged down as Christians because why are things happening? I don't understand why something's happening to me. And part of that is because God is bringing character. God is stretching us. God is developing us. And I believe we need to learn something from this. For me, I look at 2023, and this is me. This is, once again, hanging out my stuff. One of my biggest lessons that I know God showed me in some pretty big storms that I had this year was to trust God even when I saw nothing. And I mean nothing. And to claim his promises. And God's really showing me that Let it go in 2023. You've got to trust me no matter what. I have to get better at not walking by what I see and instead by walking by what he spoke. I want to get better in walking not by what I see, but walking in what he spoke. Because God has promises and he has spoken, but most of the time we don't see it. And I could park here. This is huge right here. This is Mama G. Sometimes we are confident in his promises, but can't commit to his process. Yeah, that one was that one's a real big, and I wrote park here. Sometimes we are confident in his promises, but can't commit to his process. We all know God has it. We all know the promises that he said he's going to do. But man, do I usually don't like his process. Can be very, very, very frustrating. You know, I talked last week when I talked about the offering and I talked about giving. And I talked about how we can sometimes measure our giving and then we measure God's response. Well, one of the things that God is showing me in his process is to quit questioning it, because as a pastor, there have been conversations between my husband and I, because you're not 9 to 5. You're 9 to 9 the next morning, 9 to 9 the next morning, 9 to 9 the next morning. We're doing teaching down at the ranch house last night with the Chick-fil-A team, which was phenomenal. And both our phones were ringing off the hook of people. Please, do you have a minute? I need help. And Tim's on the phone, PT's on the phone, and it's crazy. And there's some times when you got to be careful, because you could measure God's response, because there's been times when we've been on walks and he just is like, hey, I don't know how much more I can give. We have given and given and given and given, and I don't see where a building's coming. I can't see where the road's going to be stopped coming through here. I'm trying to see these things, and you can start measuring God's response because of how much you're giving. And as soon as you get in that place, it's dangerous. I don't ever want to get to, and we'll both stop each other and go, no, we're not measuring this. We're going to keep giving and giving and giving and giving and giving and giving and giving. And where God pleases and where he shows to do something is where we're going to accept it. And instead of constantly questioning what he's doing, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it anymore, because it can be frustrating. The third thing is this. Going into 2024, I want to celebrate the victories and his goodness. And the key here is that you've got to be able to recall his goodness. I think sometimes he does so much that we tend to move on and forget his victories and goodness. You know, I believe this. I don't know about you, but I 100% believe this. You ever been on the highway and you can see where an accident has just happened, literally right before you got there? That's God. That's God's goodness, that you weren't there at the time of that accident. But that's just kind of like, oh, Lord, bless them, be with them, Lord, help them. No, God, thank you for a blessing right there. Thank you for a victory right there. And I think it's easy sometimes that we kind of forget. You know, God showed me, I'm sitting over here the other day, we've got a full band up here. Now, for some of you, that's like normal, because that's what you've known. You don't understand how many years we prayed for a band. Bree prayed for a keyboard player. Mom, if I could just have a keyboard player. Because when you're leading worship and the track ends, you end. You can't go into another song. You can't do anything. And she was limited. No guitar player. It was Bree and a drummer, and because he's family, and a track. And God reminded me, don't ever forget the victories and my goodness. And I was like, God, forgive me. Thank you for this band. And I was telling some of the young people at Chick-fil-A down there, I was like, no, you don't understand. We're so grateful just to have a band. I remember when we finally decided we were going to get this wall. Never in a million years did we think we could have done that. So what is my point? You've all got these celebrations. You've all got this goodness of God, and I want us to go into 2024 rehearsing them and recalling them and knowing that God has done, he's done so much. One of our prayers was for Tuesday Fire. And Bree talked about this the other day. We wanted this church to become a church full of worshipers, to be inundated with his presence. And I'm even on a Sunday now, but a Tuesday night, look out. And that's God's goodness, and we need to celebrate it. Some of you have had amazing promotions and jobs. Some of you have had God do some amazing things with your kids. It's like all these little things that I just don't want us to go into 2024 and not first look back at, yeah, we got weaknesses, and yeah, we had storms, but oh my word, did we have victories. And when I look at last week, we had almost 20 baptisms. That's God's goodness, and that's victory. And that's for a lot of you, because most of you are servant leaders here, and you're working your tails off, and God's doing something here. One of our prayers was that the people that are here, anybody that's been in our circle knows that we met with Chick-fil-A last night and today, and one of our prayers was that they would all come to church, and every single one of them are coming tomorrow to church. There's 12 of them, all walks of life. Phenomenal young kids. One kid's 18 years old and a phenomenal leader. Hungry, they all sat with their notebooks and just soaked it in. But they're all coming to the 11 o'clock service. And that, guys, that's an answer to prayer. That's God's victory. And I want to celebrate that. I'm asking God to open my eyes to victories and blessings that I have missed before. I don't want to miss them this year. I really don't. I want to walk into a grocery store and walk into anywhere, and I want to ask God, show me something in here I could do to bless somebody and have a victory with something in here. I want to do that. But it becomes, being aware. I was sharing with one of the girls last night from Chick-fil-A about, what God has done and how we started. We drove them around on the property, and they were like, what's that? And most of you don't even know, but there's an old generator over here. Lord help us, Jesus, that generator. First of all, 3 years with no air. Then we got the generator, and every Tuesday night, right before church, we'd be in here rehearsing. Pitch black. No music, no sound, no nothing. And everybody would run out there. We anointed that generator so much with oil, you have no, it was like a big oil grease pit. We literally would go out and then anoint it all the time. And here'd be people all dressed up, they'd be running, they're sweating 95 degrees trying to get it to work. And then it would get it up, and then right in the middle of PT preaching, it would go down, and everybody just grab their phone and pull up the flashlight, and PT would just keep preaching. See, those are the things that God uses and then brings victory. And I'm glad you guys freeze in here. You're always going to freeze in here. The day, I say, can you imagine the day when we get to walk in and just take a switch and turn? When we would vacuum, it would freak me out, because I go, Lord, if it takes that generator down, and we would do it really fast. We would vacuum as quick as we could because we didn't want the generator to go down. Things that you don't think about. But see, God's blessing and our willingness to be faithful, just like your willingness to be faithful. God has blessed you. God, I guarantee you, has done so much for you in 2023 that I think you've already probably forgotten, because we're in a new year, and it's the middle of January and life takes over. Really stop and think about it. What has he done? God has done just so much that I'm just thrilled about. So the fourth one is this. Break what you don't want to take to your next. Break what you don't want to take to your next, like your thoughts, actions, and wrong questions. Break what you don't want to take to your next. Remember we talked about, it was several girl talks ago, about the Bible talks about capturing every thought. And I related it to the fact that we had a raccoon that kept coming to our back area and taking the trash everywhere, and we finally got that sucker captured and took off. And I told you to think about, when you start to think wrong thoughts, you think about capturing that dad blame raccoon and taking it somewhere, and quit thinking the thoughts that we shouldn't be thinking. And we're the worst. Women are the worst. I'm really going to ask you to really think about 2024 and your thoughts. I thought this quote was hilarious. I sent it to Kelsey one day. It says, I know the voices aren't real, but man, do they ever come up with great ideas. Is it not true? Sometimes the creation in your mind scares me sometimes because I can just come up with stuff. And then I love this one. I got to teach my facial expressions how to use their inside voice. But I believe that 2024 deserves new thoughts, new ways, and new habits. It just does. But it's going to take you and I. Some of the homework I want you guys to be thinking about, and when I wrote this down, I already came up with some for me, but is to write 5 new positive habits that you want to bring into 2024. 5 new positive habits. We can always just do habits, but I kind of rather them be positive. What do you want to take into 2024? So now I want to talk about what should I take into my next. We talked about just looking back at 2023, but this is what we want to take into our next. Number 1, we want to take in God's grace. God's grace. I love this scripture. It's 1 Corinthians 15:10, and again, it's in the TPT because I just love it. But God's amazing grace has made me who I am, and his grace to me was not fruitless. In fact, I worked harder than all the rest, yet not in my own strength, but God's. For his empowering grace is poured out upon me. John 1:16 says, and from the overflow of his fullness, we receive grace heaped upon more grace. I love that. How many of you are grateful for the grace of God? Can I tell you, and people say this all the time, but except for the grace of God, where would I be? I'm telling you, the grace of God is only everything, because you and I will never live a life where they don't make mistakes, where we don't do the wrong thing. And God's grace is crazy. 1 Timothy 1:14 says, I was flooded with such incredible grace, like a river overflowing the banks, until I was full of faith and love for Jesus, the anointed one. Flooded with such incredible grace. So we already talked about the fact that there's some weaknesses and things that we need to make sure we don't bring in. But this is the so cool thing about God. He still gives us grace, even if you've already brought some of them into 2024. And some of you are sitting here thinking, shoot, I already did bring some of it into 2024. I did. I just the other day, again, I thought I let something go. And I just loved a person that used to come here to church, and out of nowhere, they just took off and never said a word and left. And I picked it back up again and made it my fault. And I'm like, God, I cannot keep doing this. And so whatever it is, God gives you the grace. But this is the thing I'm going to ask you. As much as God gives you grace, extend grace. And extending grace sounds wonderful and sounds great, but it's not always easy at all. Let me tell you, when you walk around accepting God's grace, but you don't give grace, it's like a slap in the face to him, because he's offered you something you're not willing to give someone else. And I will tell you this, and I'm going to lay it on the line. Every day of your life is an opportunity to give God's grace. It just is. Every day. We have a gentleman that comes on Fridays to wash our vehicles, because we live in our cars. And so we're always bringing stuff to the ramp, we're doing everything. So he washes our cars for us. And he has to bring a generator, so you can hear the generator. And so we have some great neighbors that just claim the name of Jesus and love the Lord and all that. And PT is finishing up his walk, and the guy is there to do the cars. And PT's just, he's been listening to a podcast, and he's just on fire for God and walking. And all of a sudden he hears this voice, and our neighbor walks out and goes, hey, what in the world is your problem? You think there's some way you could get that guy to move it over there? Every single Friday morning, we have to hear that generator. And it's the most, and he just went on. I can't believe how rude you are. I can't, like, and Pete just standing there. I'm glad I wasn't out there. I know Bree's glad she wasn't out there because sometimes it's like, which way is he going to teeter on this one? I'm not sure if he's walking in grace or if he's walking in, he's going to bite somebody's head off. But thank God he walked in grace. And let me tell you 2 reasons why. One, because of the Lord. But the man that's washing our cars, we've been ministering to. And we've been trying to show the love of Jesus to. He's just getting his son out of prison. He's been talking with PT. He's been walking him through stuff. What would have happened if he would have done what he wanted to do? To go, oh, wow, you claim the name of Jesus, and you can't just come to me and say, I realize you don't mean to be doing this, but it would be helpful if you could, right? Then we have this neighbor who we don't want to offend, and we want to show the love of Jesus. And PT just looked, and he said, I'm so incredibly sorry. You're right. I have not been thinking right. We will make sure from now on we move all the way down, and we don't disturb you. And he walked in the house and he goes, God's grace, God's grace, God's grace, God's grace. And we needed, I'll never forget, I got to tell this story. We were traveling with his family on the road, and we were in Texas or somewhere, and we were hungry. We had been working all day, and so we went to this chicken restaurant, and we're all sitting down, and they brought us this chicken, all this baked chicken, and we all like opened it, and we were like, and then it was still like pink, like there was still stuff, and I'm like, ooh, woo, no. And so we're all like, excuse me, but you need to come over here, but I'm so sorry, but we can't do this. And the guy goes, oh, no, that's how we serve our chicken here. You're totally fine. And he just kept going, and Tim would say something, and he would combat him. And he'd say something, we'd combat him. I'm going, this is not going to be well. This is not going to be pretty. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, his chair goes flying back. I mean, his chair flew back. And he stood up and he said, let me tell you something. We're from chicken territory, and I know what chicken is. And we went, chicken territory? Who's from chicken territory? What does that even mean? And the guy goes, well, excuse me, I'll take it back. And he walks away, we all go, really, honey? Chicken territory? Like, he said it was the best thing I could think of. And he wasn't feeling God's grace at that point. He's like ticked. I'm hungry. You know what happens when you get hungry? And he wanted to know, he was going to let that guy know we're from chicken territory. Whatever that meant. I have no idea. But we tell that story all the time, and he just laughs about it. But his chair flew back, and I went, this is not going to be good. Don't ever forget, you and I are here strictly because of his grace. Your job is his grace. Your house is his grace. Your car is his grace. Your abilities are his grace. Raising your kids is his grace. Having a spouse is his grace. God's grace. But just make sure we also give it out. And you're going to find a way, being a servant leader here, or even just going here to church, you're going to find a way to give God's grace, because there's going to be times when somebody's going to push a button or somebody's going to do something. We had a massive fall bash here one time, and we invited these friends of ours that had a really big business, and so all their people came to fall bash, people everywhere. And I was in the kitchen washing dishes, and another lady was with me that goes to church and here, but she wasn't on the team or anything. And this lady slings the door open to the cafe and she goes, excuse me, but I need my pan washed, and I need it washed right now because I'm leaving and I'm not taking this pan home dirty. And she sticks it in my face, and I'm like, okay. And I'm standing there, and I've got this lady here who's waiting to see what I'm going to say. And I said, ma'am, I would be honored to get your pan clean. Give me just 1 minute. And she walked out, and their girl goes, oh, I could never be in the ministry. She said, I'm tell you something right now. I told you what I was getting ready to tell that woman. She could take her pan where the sun don't shine. She says, there was no way. I'm like, I know you get to have grace, because you don't ever know, because people walk around in entitlement. And entitlement is the worst thing for me. I can't take it. But you can give grace. The next one is go into 2024 with God's freedom. God's freedom. John 8:6. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. No questions. I love that. No questions. Jesus has set you free. You are free. But this is the key. You and I have to choose to walk in that freedom. PT has said it many times, even in the wilderness, when they finally got out of slavery, they never got the slavery out of them. They still weren't walking in freedom. And you and I get to decide. Something can be given to you all day long, but if you don't take it, you don't have it. Something can be given to you all day long, but if you don't take it, you don't have it. God offers you freedom all day, but if you don't take it, then you don't have it. And you get the choice. The words that were spoken over you that crushed you, they're not your sentence or your future. They are the enemy to your freedom if you let them be. Whatever's been done to you in the past, if you don't walk out of it and get freedom, you're going to be bound in it. Now, this rocked my world. I read it to PT earlier, and I'm like, this is going on my mirror. So I want everybody to write this down. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Is that powerful? You and I are the ones that have to call it out. It's not up to the person that put us in the bondage. And sometimes that could be ourselves. But God's offering us freedom. He's not a legalist. He's not in your face with his fist. Listen, you will never be a good little girl. You won't. And God never asked you to be a good little girl. He asked you to be someone that is saved by grace, walking in the light. You're the daughter of God. You're figuring life out with him every day. But you've got to walk in the freedom that if you make a mistake, God is still there and you have the freedom to walk. He offers you freedom. He gives you a place to make the mistake and then move on. And I talk to so many ladies who are so bound and can't walk in any kind of freedom. I talked to a lady who made a huge mistake in 2023. And the fact that she was willing to come talk to me was amazing. And I told her if she does not let it go and walk in God's freedom, and the next thing we're going to talk about is his forgiveness, but walk in that, it's going to eat her alive. And she was like, I don't know how to do it because the mistake that she made is in front of her every day. And she gets to see it. And I said, listen, he's not wringing his hands. He already knows. He will give you the freedom, but you've got to be willing to accept it and forgive yourself and let it go. And I've been trying to walk with her to let this go. And I told her this, mark my words, one day God will use this to help somebody else. I believe this quote, it's in my book, my More book, but transparency from a place of victory is a powerful tool. Transparency from a place of victory is a powerful tool. God, when you get victory over things you're going through, then God's going to use you. Somewhere, I'm telling you, out of nowhere, someone's going to come up to this lady and somehow just say, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I made this decision in my life and I don't know how to get rid of it. I don't know how to get past it. And she's going to be like, well, let me tell you. I had to walk it out. And let me tell you what I did. God will use it all. Now it's going to take some time. We're digging deep. I'm having to walk with her, and we're having to really let it go. But just remember, you can walk in his freedom, no matter what it was. The last one is, or the next one, if it's my last one, is got to walk in God's forgiveness. I don't know if you guys remember when I talked on forgiveness, and I talked how my dad always told me that if I could think of it this way, that there's a lake and it's got a sign that says no fishing. And every time Jesus says you go to fish out what you did wrong and you want to bring it back up again, the sign says no fishing. No more fishing. Put your rod down God already forgave it. You're forgiven. You got to let it go. You've got to learn. You and I've got to learn to forgive ourselves and then forgive others. And that's when I talked with this lady, that was one of the hardest things for her, was to forgive herself. And I think sometimes it's just hard because there's been things that have been happening. And we feel like that if we're forgiving somebody, we're releasing them to anything they've ever done to us, and that's not at all. You're actually just saying, I don't want you to rule over my life anymore. I thought this was interesting. It says, without forgiveness, life is governed by an endless cycle of resentment and retaliation. An endless cycle, but it's governed. Your life is governed by it because you haven't let it go. Forgiveness, this one was a hard one for me. Forgiveness is a sign that the person who wronged you means more to you than the wrong they dealt you. Forgiveness is a sign that the person who wronged you means more to you than the wrong they dealt you. You care more about that person, not about the action that they did, and you forgive them, which is a tough place. This is my favorite one, because I don't think we should go into 2024 without it. Number 4 is to have God's wisdom. In Proverbs 4:7-9 in the TPT, wisdom is the most valuable commodity, so buy it. Revelation knowledge is what you need, so invest in it. Wisdom will exalt you when you exalt her truth. She will lead you to honor and favor when you live your life by her insights. You will be adorned with beauty and grace, and wisdom's glory will wrap itself around you, making you victorious in the race. Proverbs 4:6-7 says, don't forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme. Therefore, get wisdom, though it cost all you have. Get understanding. I don't think he's any more blatant than to keep telling us we've got to get wisdom. This one's Proverbs 8:11 in the TPT. Wisdom is so priceless that it exceeds the value of any jewel. Nothing you could wish for could equal her. For I am wisdom, and I am shrewd and intelligent. I have at my disposal living understanding to devise a plan for your life. Wisdom pours into you when you begin to hate every form of evil in your life, for that's what worship and fearing God is all about. I don't know about you, but I want this year to go into this year with wisdom, to go in this year with God's understanding, to go in. I have made so many decisions before seeking him. I used to get so annoyed at my mom because we would just go, like we would have an occasion or something, and we would go to the store till we'd have to find a dress or something. And she'd go, wait, we can't leave the house yet. We need to pray. We need to ask God for wisdom and ask God for favor. And I'm like, we're going to buy a dress, Mother. That's all we're going to do. And I look at it now, and she had it right. In everything you do, God wants to give you wisdom. I don't have the wrong dress, do you? He cares about it. But we have to ask. And I mean, every one of these scriptures is, I'm right. One of the scriptures I was going to read, but it was very long, and it's in Proverbs, but it talks about, I'm walking down the street, and you walk past me. You know, you don't even see me. And we do that so many times. I am so guilty. I'm guilty. All 4, 2 arms and 2 legs. Walk right past God's wisdom, and it says wisdom is walking down the street for you to grab. And the Bible says if you'll just ask. We ask for so many things, and then we don't think to ask for that. And think about it. I want you to think about 2023. There's got to be some situations in your life that if you had really taken some time to ask for wisdom, they would have been a different turnout. But God's just saying be willing to ask and be willing to seek and be willing to say, I've got something for you, but I want you to ask for wisdom. You and I get to decide what we're going to do in this next year. You and I get to decide what we're going to take into this next year. And I don't know what it's going to be. You know, one thing I wanted to say in here, and I didn't have it down. One thing I do want you to write down is that you go into 2024 with gratitude. A life without gratitude is miserable. And to me, gratitude paves the way for so much. Your life would be so different, I think, if we could understand and be more grateful. I was reminded the other day, this was probably 3 years, maybe 4 years ago, we went to Honduras. And we went to see the houses for the women that have been sex trafficking, but we also went to feed, I don't remember how many, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And so the kids and I and PT, they took us in a van and they showed us up to the site where they deliver. They give out these boxes of food, and it's hot in Honduras, like hot. And the guy's air didn't really work that great in the van. And we're like going down the road, and I'm like, oh, the missionary life. I don't know if God called me. I know He didn't call PT. They put us up in this hotel, you guys. I don't even know if you call it a hotel, right, Bree? Oh, you guys. We pulled up, and they said, well, we're going to get you an extra mattress so that we put Blake on the floor, God forgive us, but Blake would go on the floor because we all stayed in one room because we don't want to go in any room by ourselves. So they go, well, we'll pull up to this other place we know and we'll get a mattress. Now we're in this old beat up bus, dirty, hot, no air, all the windows are down. And all of a sudden the back door opens and they just cram this mattress, I don't know where it came from, and just shoved it into the bus. And we were like, oh my gosh. And Blake goes, I've got to sleep on that. I'm like, think of it as camping, baby. Think of it as camping. It's all about camping. But before I tell you the story, we had been there for a couple days suffering for Jesus, trust me. And as they were taking us back to the airport, PT looks up and goes, there's a Hilton? That's a Hilton. I didn't know there was a Hilton. And they were like, did you want to stay at the Hilton? He goes, of course I wanted to stay at the Hilton. What are we thinking here? And so the next time we stayed at the Hilton, but it was hilarious. But anyway, so we're spoiled. So we're in this van and we're in this bus and it's hot and it's all this stuff. And we pull up and there are at least five box trucks, which means solid walls, okay? Just a big box truck. And the door lifts up, and hundreds of people come piling out of this closed-in box truck. They'd get in a line, and they stand there waiting for their box. And I just kept standing here. I was speechless. No grumbling, no complaining. So glad they were getting a box of food for the week. They stood in the line, and then, I'm telling you, I'm talking little grandmothers that are 80 and 90 years old, and they just start piling the people on this truck, because if they don't take them to their little area in the truck, people will rob them on the way with the box on their head and take their food. And they're piling them, and they're taking these little grandmothers and hurling them up to the very back of this truck. Hundreds of people piled in this truck. And they're on there for an hour waiting for it to get filled up with everybody. And I'm just standing here going, and I'm not happy because I'm in a bus that's dirty and there's no air and we had a nasty mattress. Really? And the smiles on their faces for a box of food was mind-boggling to me. And we had sent medicine, and we were going down, and the lady speaks Creole, and she was asking what they needed and passing out the vitamins to them. And I just stood there and was like, God, forgive me for not being grateful. I think we become so desensitized to what we have. Every one of us, as far as I know in this room, have a roof over our head. They went to feed the homeless yesterday. None of us were there living there. We may have been there helping. We have a roof over our head. You got a choice of what you were going to wear today. I got to choose what I was going to wear today. I had meals. I want to go into 2024 with gratefulness every day. And I'm asking God to help me see what I am not normally seeing. And he reminded me of this. When I said, God, I want to be grateful, he said, then let me remind you of a story. And then he reminded me of the story where all we did at this church was give out 1 bottle of kids' vitamins to each family. That's all we did. And you would swear that we had just pulled out $1 million out of our suitcase. The moms were, because they were chewable vitamins, the moms were opening up the tops and smelling them. They were so grateful. And that was where the young lady that we had gone and met from the sex trafficking place, we've talked about this before, and she had cleft feet. And all she could do was walk. Well, she could have been in a wheelchair, but she chose to just walk everywhere. But when we walked up, she had a baby in her lap. And Bree went over and said, they helped translate because she spoke Spanish, and said, can we help with, can I hold the baby? And so she said yes. And so she took the baby and put her in her arms, and we walked around. And so that night we asked the pastor's son, could you tell us about her story? And he said, well, it will break your heart. He said, but before I tell you her story, I want to tell you that she's the most grateful person that we have at our church. She's the most faithful. She's here before the doors ever open. She helps with everything. She cleans our church every week on her knees. She does everything. But the reason she's here is because her father raped her, and that's what that baby is from. And then when after she had the baby, decided that he did not need her in his life, and the church found out that he was selling her and the baby that day, and they bought her. And there she is. Well, 2 years later is when we went to give out the vitamins. And I remember we were just passing them out, and people were going crazy, and we're busy and everything. And I looked down, and there she is. And her 2-year-old son is standing over her like this now, holding her hand because she's on her knees. And she looked at me, and she's like, you're here. And I was like, oh, my gosh. And I hugged her. Her smile, she's the most gorgeous thing. And I said, I want to give you some vitamins, and I want to give your son a bottle of vitamins. And she goes, no, you've already given everybody just one. We'll only take one. I'm like, no, please, I want to give you 2. And she just held on to those vitamins, and the little boy starts crying, and they're walking off, and it's a bottle of vitamins, you guys. If I handed those to you tonight, you'd look at me like I was crazy. Why are you giving me a bottle of vitamins? But for them, it's life-giving. And for them, it's special. And for them, they can't get things like that. And I'm sorry, my point is that God's riveting me with being grateful and walking in a grateful heart this year, so that no matter what, whatever I'm going through, whatever's happened to me, whoever God brings into my life, that I'm walking. Because I always can tell when I'm walking beside somebody that's grateful. You can just tell because they just reek it. They're just grateful. And I want us as women to start doing that. I want to carry it to 2024, and I want to see what God does. So I'm sorry, I didn't need to get into all that. But, when God starts working on me, he gets to work on you through me. So there you go. So anyway, so there's that. And we're going into 2024 with what we can change and what we can bring, and take God's grace and take his forgiveness. But I would love, thank you, Lord. I would love to hear from anyone that has anything. I just realized I said Honduras, but we did that. Was it Honduras or Haiti? It doesn't matter. Okay, Honduras. Okay. Anybody? Anybody want to cry like me, or leave me out here by myself, hang me out to dry? Did anything hit anybody to go, wow, there are some things I want to do different? Or, yes, Miss Ann, I think Bree's going to bring a mic to you.